from your perspective, how can organizations focus on profits, which is, I say, is a lot of times like the air that we breathe. Yes, we work in a capitalist environment or world where profits are for a lot of companies essential. But how can companies strike that balance between profitability and fostering engagement and well-being of employees? So, Sarah.
So now I will start answering. Um, of course, as you mentioned, every company exists in the end to earn an income or to have profits. Well, not necessarily. Orgs don't really go for profits, but they do need to be able to pay their employees, and you need to be able to pay for the services that you're providing for everyone. And you asked, how can we keep employees engaged? For me, as a leader, uh, it needs to be more than just about profits why you exist. Uh, there must be like a mission, some kind of company values. What are you trying to achieve? What kind of impact are you trying to make in the world? Whether or not you're trying to change, let's say, HR so that it's much better running, or you're going to make seamless payments in a web shop, or whatever it is. There needs to be some kind of purpose or mission in which you're trying to achieve with your organization. That's how you connect with customers in the end. That's how you get them to want to buy your products. And then it needs to start at the micro level, down to the very, let's say, bottom of the organization. What mission does each individual have? And what values do they have? And leaders uh, need to help their employees recognize what these are and help map it towards impact in the organization. So, for example, I was a software engineer for some 20 years, um, uh, writing code and everything like that. But I'm a lot more than that. I want to light fires in people. I want to motivate people. I'm a creative person. I'm artistic. I'm a lot more. And in order to engage me back when I was an engineer, to want to work for your company, I needed to find a bit of me going towards the upper impact of the organization. So, if I could, let's say, improve teams around me, if I could bring the creativity into the end product, if I could somehow connect a little bit of me to what the company is trying to achieve, then I was engaged and I was feeling something. And that's the job of leaders. And it can it can be hard because you really have to stop and listen and ask what drives you, what excites you, what motivates you. Not just what your talents are, which is also quite important, but what impact do you want to make in the world? And then map it to your organization and what your organization is doing. And there you go. You've got engagement.
Yeah, and just to follow up on that question, because I see that a lot. Different people have different values and beliefs, right? And different motivations. So, somebody out of college is going to have different goals probably than somebody that's mid-career versus somebody that's looking to retire in a few years. And we work on these cross-functional, a lot of times diverse teams with different beliefs, with different motivations. How do you, as a leader, I guess, help people from different paths and different motivating factors align towards that bigger vision that they're working on as a team, maybe, or a set of teams?
Well, there's different layers. So I really do believe you can have different convictions existing in the same space as long as all values in that room are honored.
Mm-hmm.
And values are not, let's say, talents. They're really, I need this to exist to thrive. So
Mm-hmm.
as long as everyone is honoring each other's values, what they need in order to thrive, then they feel seen, heard, respected. They can stand there. But then you need to be able to dig a little deeper into individuals. And for example, engineers, you'll have a team of like, maybe five, maybe some teams up to 12 engineers, and they're all coming from different socioeconomic backgrounds. They have some are parents, some are right out of university from different generations. You have different talents in the team, different passions, different personality types. And you, as a leader, you want to be able to produce the best product. Um, it really, again, starts at that micro level. Figure out those individuals, what motivates them and what excites them, and how can they bring their talents and their motivations to that team and to what the team is trying to deliver. It can be that you might need to wear different hats. If you have somebody that's a good team player and really good at, let's say, combining people, et cetera, then maybe they want to step more into like the organizing team events, or maybe they want to be a scrum master or something. But if you have someone that's, maybe very introverted, isn't very social, doesn't really want to be social, loves the technology, et cetera, maybe they are good at risk assessment or something, then maybe they want to be more in the background and supporting the system. And it's really about puzzling it out so that people are doing what makes them excited and where they can thrive, and they bring it to the overall goal of the project.
Yeah, nice, nice, well said. Steve or Krishna, I don't want to, maybe I'll start picking them and calling you guys to chime in as you. What are
So in general, I would completely agree with what Sarah said, but I would also like to turn the question upside down, in the sense that how do we engage the top guys? Because often they live in a world of their own and are completely disconnected to the organization. And there, I think it's more important than ever to be extremely clear on what is the purpose, the higher purpose, what Sarah was talking about. How can you clarify that? Then I think it's really important to create what I call the unity of purpose. Mind you, the word I'm using, create, cause the unity of purpose, because often these high sounding words are used like on the posters, on the banners, in the corporate offices, and it becomes like an exercise of lip service. No one really believes it. So how can you cause that? How can you make it happen? And it really starts from the top, to have a crystal clear idea of why the organization exists. But then there is something that, again, now Sarah said is very significant, that every individual is like a universe in and unto themselves. So if we are having different interests in our personal lives, how can we find unity in something as boring as a job? And that is something that needs to be worked on actively. And here I make the connection with what I think is one of the most powerful elements, and which is mostly ignored. And I'm referring to, now hold your seats, I'm referring to throughput economics. So yes, we were talking about profit before, but I want to make that discourse even more low level. Why? Because notwithstanding that we as individuals have different personal ambitions and directions, the reason why we are going to work is that we do need more money today and in the future, because I'm setting up a family, because I need a larger house, I need to send the kids to university, and so on and so forth. And I also want to spend more time with my family, with my friends, with my hobbies. So, in my view, those are the common denominators that can unite everyone to be able to, earn more in less time. And that's what I call the work time relationship. If we can reason in that dimension, which is very low level, it's at the bottom Maslow's hierarchy of needs. But if we can get a convergence at that level, then we can see how the contribution of each and everyone can help in that higher purpose. And there are tools to make this happen. There are tools that relate to, of course, since I mentioned throughput economics, one key element is the presence of the constraints. I will always get back to that. It's my pet peeve, my reason for existing in this world, to talk about the constraints and Herbie and all of that. But it is really the unifying point. So let me tell you a bit about this, how I got there, because it is really relevant. I came to discover the idea of unity of purpose from Koplin's organizational design patterns for software engineering, and I was fascinated by that. Yes, no, we must have this unity of purpose. Of course, it's obvious, but then to make it happen, it was really, really hard. 2007, I discovered David Anderson's book on the theory of constraints in software engineering management. I'm not sure the title was, if I remember the title correctly, but that's where I discovered the constraint, the Herbie. And it was an incredible aha moment, because I realized that having a constraint has an enormous power, an enormous focusing power, and acts like a catalyst. It converges all attention, all energy, all and everyone are focusing on that single point. So if you are able to find the constraint, then you have this wonderful tool that can bring everyone together. And that is the first step. Then, of course, now each and every one of us have to figure out by themselves how that can affect their personal life. So what is their personal goal? How does my contribution to the company help the constraint? And how does that return back to me? Which in turn implies, and this is another huge, huge topic, implies how is the company, dividing the cake? What are the reward systems that are in place? How does HR value each one of us, and do you get the bonus or not? Again, those are like trivial things, if you want, but they all impact how each and everyone relates to the organization.
Okay. Krishna, what about you? What are your thoughts on this topic?
All right, so I'm actually glad I'm going last because I get to so much to play off of here. I just work through kind of what Sarah said and what Steve said. I agree with both of you. I think both of you are, have nailed the issue in terms of how engagement needs to be fostered. But Sarah said focus on kind of the teams and the team dynamics. Steve zoomed out a little bit more and said, let's look at the leadership and how the leadership looks at the organization, right? What I'm going to say is let's zoom out even further. Go back to the customer, right? What is your customer trying to do with you, right? To me, that in the end is what the purpose of the is not money, right? Money is a side product. Right? Money happens when you actually happen to do something useful for somebody else, right? If you are of value to somebody else, then they will pay you money, right? If you're not of value to somebody else, they won't pay you money, right? So the idea is, if you zoom out far enough, you're going to be looking at yourself not as the organization, right? But inside the ecosystem of the people who are coming to you to provide some value, right? And if you understand what those are, why do they come to you, right? Why do they work with you, right? And you actually start focusing. So now you have one set of what we call value streams, right? People coming in from the outside, looking to get something out of you, right? And you help them, they pay you, right? Now, inside the company, there's another set of what we call value streams, right? You're bringing your skills to work. People are paying you for that. You're supposed to align somehow these two things so that the work that you do in the internal value streams, right, gets connected back to what the users or your customers are paying you for, right? And to me, that is the link that creates the unity of purpose, right? So unity of purpose comes from outside. It doesn't come from inside. It's not your purpose to exist. Your purpose to exist is driven by something that happens because you were a startup once, right? Nobody cared what you did until somebody cared, and then that became your purpose, right? So that's how most organizations grow, right? They don't necessarily start out with an innate purpose. They become purposeful because they provide value to somebody else, right? And so customers, to me, understanding what your customers do, understanding what value you provide to them, right, is the first dimension, right?
So
And
maybe
that will
pause.
change,
Yeah, and
and that will change across the history of your company, right? When you're small, you might just have one value stream. When you're bigger, you may have multiple value streams. Maybe you need to organize so that different parts of the customer experience need different kinds of motivation, technology, skills, and so on and so forth, right? So when you start thinking customer first, outside in first, then all of a sudden, most of the internal conflicts, right, become resolved in favor of, does this help the customer do something better, right? We do pay a lot of lip service to customer value and all those other things, but in reality, those are all abstractions. They sit somewhere outside while we are worrying about all the internal negotiations of project structure, code structure, organizational structure, and so on and so forth. Just to me, this is actually a fairly big evolution, right? So for me, I'm a software engineer. I have a PhD in computer science. I wrote code for 25 years. Then I was a CTO, VP of engineering. I did fractional CTO work for a while. I'm a highly technical person, and I live and breathe the actual technology. I still write code. For me to give up the idea that the technology was the thing that was most important was actually a fairly hard decision. I struggled against it, right? But in the end, what happens is that if you think about it logically, I'm also a logical person. So if you think about it logically, right, it is the only way you can actually make anything align, right? If you're looking at your customer as your purpose, right? Then there's an easy tiebreaker there, right? It's not about whether your CEO wants a bonus or you are looking for the environment that you want to work in. Ultimately, the tiebreaker is, does this help, right? And then that filters down, right? So I think that, in a sense, I look at the outside in view as setting the unity of purpose. And then everything else that comes, we have technology tools. We know how to do throughput economics. We know how to do organizational design. We know how to do fast flow. The tiebreaker for all of this is, okay, why, right? And why for me is customer, right? And so that's my sort of take on this. Value is determined by the customer. If you organize by customer value, right?
Yeah.
And then everything else sort of flows from there. We've built a lot of technology. We've built a lot of knowledge about agility and so on and so forth. They can be directed in ways where the tiebreakers are relatively easy to understand. Why are we doing this? Does it actually provide value to the customer? My take.
No, that's great, and I have follow-up question, but Sarah has also raised her hand, so I'll go after Sarah because I think those are all things that I also observe. But Sarah, what are your thoughts on this? Or
I'm sorry, I just have to add a little bit for this. I understand your take on it, being in management now. For example, if you work for a giant organization like a grocery store, in the end, you want to bring fresh groceries to your end customer, you want them to be happy, etc. And it can be the view of management that everyone should be motivated by, let's say, the value that the organization is bringing. But I feel that it's too simplified. Especially if you take a look at all of the individuals that work for your organization, you want to keep them motivated. You need to consider where they are at in their development cycle, like as an individual, how leveled up they are, and how far does their impact stretch yet. So there's many people in the organization where their impact is really only going towards their team, where other people are already impacting their product, maybe the domain. Leaders, we're cross-domain already. We're already on the organizational level, so we're very close to the customer value stream. If we want to go down to the core of it, how to keep everyone motivated, we as leaders need to realize that if you're not able to, let's say, expand your impact yet to that end customer, you're not, and this is big organizations. Small organizations, it's easier because your customers are right there. You really can influence exactly that customer bringing home the groceries and being happy, etc. I've been that engineer in big organizations. And although I may be very excited about what we're doing as an organization, we're bringing groceries home to the customers, et cetera. If I don't feel that my purpose or motivation is, let's say, expanding to my impact level. So let's say I'm a junior engineer and it's just at the team level and I'm not able to connect my purpose to that level, then I'm not going to feel motivated, no matter how excited I am about the end customer.
Yeah.
So I think it's really, really great. But just simplified to the point of think about those value streams, as you mentioned, and the impact level that a person or individual is able to make yet. And of course, as leaders, we're trying to level people up so that their impact is growing and it's expanding until eventually it gets to that end customer. But I just had to add that. Maybe it's
No,
because I was the first one to speak, and I'm
I
just
fully
like,
agree
I
with
just
that.
needed
Yeah,
to
I fully
explain
agree
a
with
little
that.
bit
Yeah.
better.
Yeah, it's actually very easy to misinterpret what I said as saying, well, everybody just look at the customer, right? Because that's clearly not feasible, right? And that's
Yeah,
where the real challenge
exactly.
of
That's like
management
such a
is.
disconnect sometimes in organizations. Like,
Yes,
okay, it's
yes,
really nice, but like I'm not able to
right.
really impact that where I'm
But to me,
standing.
that is a job of leaders, right? So in
Yeah.
other words, if you're 2 steps away from the customer, right,
Hmm.
then your job is to figure out how you fit in that chain as a leader for sure, right?
Yeah,
And then
100%.
fostering that ethos into your team, right?
Yeah.
Because ultimately, you have to make that customer connect. So let's say you're a database administrator, right?
Yeah.
Uh, Running, let's say, PostgreSQL. I mean, what is your connection to the customer? I mean, often it's very, very far away, right? But the point is that if you're part of the unit that is maybe serving, let's say you're an insurance company and you're part of a unit that is serving insurance claims, then as a DBA, if you understand the insurance domain, that helps you, right? So building the connection to what the customer domain is, rather than being a pure technician or a pure technologist, gives you insights, right, into what thing you're doing, how you fit into that universe, right?
Yeah.
And if you don't
And
have
as
that,
leaders, we're keeping track of that, and we see the holistic view, and
yeah,
we see those value streams all the way down to,
yeah,
but it might be hard for all of the individuals to feel
mhm,
a real heart-to-heart connection to
right,
the end point if they don't feel, let's say, they can, of course, we see that and we're bringing them farther to it. But
yeah.
I think that's actually one of the fails of many leaders, is that we just assume that if we have a vision statement and a mission statement and values at the top, that everyone is motivated.
Right.
And even if they bring it up all the time in meetings, and I think the extra work is to really get to at the bottom and see how we're pushing up towards that and helping them expand towards that.
So here's
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that the leadership, this is really the job of leadership in my mind, right? Making that connection. So if you're a generalist coming in for generalist skills in a company, the real value you add is actually connecting that to the customer value stream, or at whatever level you bring it in, right?
100%.
And leaders have more responsibility than almost everybody else to do that, right? Your specific environment, your specific company, it doesn't matter what you did in your last company. If you don't understand how that fits the current company, then you're not actually as valuable as you should be, right? So that becomes a job of leadership, I think, to make
Yeah,
that connection,
100%.
right? And foster it. That's the communication. And Gene Kim talks about the socio-technical wiring, right? What is passing along the socio-technical wiring? It's the value, right? The value idea of what value you're providing, how you communicate that, how people see themselves fitting, and incentives too. Really, I think a friend of mine, Rajdeep Ghai, is out there busy reorganizing whole companies, right, along customer value streams, which means everybody's incentives, bonuses are all tied directly to what happens to customers, right? They're
oh
not tied to meeting your things. Right?
let me ask you this then.
Yeah.
I agree with everything that you're saying, but the reality for most people probably listening here is that they work in bureaucratic organizations, top-down organizations. You're talking about value streams. They don't even know maybe what value stream is because they're in silos and functions, right? They don't have that alignment. They do have those big signs on there. They don't even know what value is. Like, if you go and ask people, how do you define value? Who's your customer? What's the difference between customer and user? Most of us would say, I don't know, Krishna, Sarah, tell me, right? So that organizational design, architect, whatever you want to call the way that people are organized in most, companies don't have that purpose because of the structure, because it's siloed, right? They don't have that view into what value is because of those silos. So what would you say, I guess, in context of innovation, in context of organizational design, and like, how do they go about being more engaged? Maybe.
So, this is reality, right? The idea of value streams and customer value streams have been around for a while, but no one really actually takes them seriously, right? So if you believe that this is the right way to do it, right? And if you sort of understand logically, it seems like it should make sense, right? If you do good by a customer, then things will work. And a lot of highly customer responsive companies do work that way, right? So one thing I personally do, is I go back and I try to show them their organization as is, organized by value streams. So I'm a measurement guy. I do use data, and that's my focus, right? So I actually go back and try to give if I organize this by these customer needs, and it's actually some work. It's not necessarily trivial to do, right? What does your current organization look like in terms of how you serve your current customer, right? You'll see bottlenecks, you'll see, things taking too long, you'll see the impact of your current way of working on the customer, right? It's a conversation starter. We all know change is hard. People don't make changes easily, right? And I think that, to me, that is the first step. You have to be able to show people the impact of your current organization structure, whatever it is, right, on value streams, which means getting people to understand what the value streams are, mapping your current value stream onto the current organization structure, understanding what flow means in that, and so on and so forth, right? But it's actionable, right? But the thing is that if you do it, it becomes a conversation starter to basically start saying, all right, maybe we should think of fixing this, right? It may not work either, because we all know there's lots of other motivations behind this that organizations have to exist internally too, right? So that would be my answer. That's the first step. And then there's a long journey. So if you actually want to change to make actually go anywhere with it. But that's the first step.
Steve, let's hear from you. What are your thoughts on everything that's been said so far?
Well, I will get to this point of the silos in a moment, but I wanted to do another reflection first on what has been said. And I sort of like Krishna's exercise of zooming out, but I think we should go even further and zoom out even more. Because at a certain point, companies will ask us, and why are we here? Now, what are we doing? And this reminds me of the story of in the Middle Ages, there was someone breaking stones in a quarry, and they asked, what do you do? I'm just breaking stones. And they asked another guy besides him, what are you doing? I'm contributing to building a cathedral. So the job is the same, but the purpose is completely different. And that comes from within, from what you see yourself contributing to the world. So in today's companies, you might be asking, what is the purpose here? Well, we're selling solar panels because we want to help customers to save energy. Or you could say, no, I'm in a larger purpose. I have a larger mission that I care about the green world that we are living in. Still same job, still same solar panel, but your attitude is completely different. And that comes, I think, from the purpose that the leader of the company, the founder, the CEO, is able to define, instill, and transmit. So it all comes from there. It's a matter of leadership at the end of the day. Then to the silos. It is, in my opinion, it is the wrong problem. Yes, everyone sees the silos and sees the problems, and the value stream is a one way to approach it, but that is not how you resolve these things. In my view, you resolve it by getting people to think differently. Why? Because if you're looking at what is causing the dysfunctions in the silos, it's not the presence or lack or visualization or management or mapping of a value stream. It is instead the ideas that cause one of the most dysfunctional practices of all businesses, I'm referring to the budgeting process, causes different areas to be in competition between themselves without even knowing it. So the company is overloaded with internal conflicts, which of course slow down everything and drain energy and make people fight one another, maybe in subtle ways which are not open and apparent. So how do you resolve this? You need to intervene at the top level and change the way that things are valued, but that changes the whole way that the budgeting processes could happen. And for instance, the OKRs. Most companies use OKRs nowadays. But at the end of the day, that is also a reflection of the hierarchical structure of the company. And even though you are asking people to produce their contribution at the lower levels of this tree so that they own the solution and they are engaged in the solution, what happens is that one branch of the OKRs will be conflicting with the other branch. So you still have those conflicts. Again, and I go to the very basics, what is it that can unite this? My reply is throughput economics. Because if you start valuing the contributions of all these branches with this single metric, so not a gazillion of KPIs, you will be able to resolve a lot of those conflicts. And when you have an organization where you are eradicating conflicts, you will have a much nicer place where to work. You get along with others much, much better. And mind you, in the TOC, theory of constraints, perspectives, conflicts are not negative. They are absolutely positive. So we value conflicts. Why? Because they always indicate that there is missing information. Someone does not have the whole picture. I could be wrong, you could be wrong, or we could both be wrong. But we are able to clarify and gain a common vision, a common understanding, a common mental model, a common way of making decisions, and a common way to turning those decisions into actions. Well, a lot of that infighting and waste of energy and time will literally disappear. And that resolves also the issue of getting people onto the same page and rowing in the same direction. But again, but this is my refrain. You need to get throughput economics into the picture.
But doesn't that require organizational restructure? How can you get throughput economics if you still have silos and functions?
No, silos and functions are not antithetical to throughput economics. Throughput economics is a way to make decisions. It's not a way to structure the organization. So no matter what structure you have, or what structure you are aiming at getting at in the future as an improvement or transformation process, the logic of throughput economics is always the same. And there is one key thing: you need to know where the constraint is.
I guess what I'm implying is that does in any way organizational structure have any impact on throughput economics?
Well, let's put it this way. Goldratt's first book, The Goal, had as a subtitle, The Process of Ongoing Improvement. Okay. So the goal is a process of ongoing improvement. What does that mean? It means that you do not engage in large-scale transformations where you have state A, which you don't like, and you want to get to state B and do a transformation. Instead, what you do is that you find the constraint in the company, and then you work around that. The way that you handle and address the constraint might imply that you change organizational structures, but it is a consequence of reasoning around the constraint. It is a consequence of constraints management. It's not that you do the redesign and the restructuring and the re-architecture and the transformation before in order to manage the constraint. It's the opposite. You find the constraint, and then all other things emerge from that understanding and through the economic lens of throughput economics.
Okay, that makes sense. Krishna?
So yeah, one thing I wanted to mention here is, I'm a big fan of TeamFlow, Steve's approach. I think that there's a lot of wealth of knowledge there. One of the things that I've personally learned over the years is you have to. The hardest part is understanding the specific context of a business, right? We have a lot of technologies, techniques, theories, value streams, theory of constraints. The hardest part is actually in the context a particular business at a particular point in time, which ones of these tools do we bring to the table to use? So for instance, if you don't use the term value streams, it doesn't matter to me, right? It's not about mapping, it is not about the tooling, or it's not about whatever you do with it, right? It's the mindset of what are you focusing on first, right? And for me, I'm like a omnivore. I learn whatever techniques I need, whether it's complexity theory or whether it is complexity science or flow or value stream management. The bigger the tool set that you have to be able to bring to the table to sort of frame and look at problems at different levels, because the problem, at the value network level is different from the value stream level, is different from the team level. Technology itself is a whole different set of languages, right? The thing that I always say is we should be able to look at all these things holistically, but the real art is in combining them in the context of a given company, right? There's no silver bullet that's going to solve any one of these problems for you in isolation. So the real challenge is how do you bring all these things together to actually solve the specific problem that a particular company at a particular point in time has to do, and that is really all we can do, right? So I think to me that's if there's one thing I've learned in all these years is like none of these, there's no single answer to any one of these. If we start looking at this by one lens, every one of those is going to be biased one way or the other.
That's a very good point. Yeah. Sarah, anything else to add before I want to bring it back to what you guys said, but any?
I highly apologize, but the conversation went around so much, I've totally lost track of what the question was. So,
This was around
engagement.
So I need the question again.
So we started with employee engagement, and then we merged into I believe Krishna and Steve started talking about value, and I said how many people actually know what value is, and then organizational structure. We delved into that. So I guess maybe just to bring it back from your perspective, a lot of times we say we have to deliver value. We deliver value, but a lot of times people don't know what that value is. So from your perspective, how can organizations define value? Or what's when you go to a client's office or when you're working with a team, how do you help them define customers, value, users? Maybe I think that would be a helpful question.
Okay. I thought the question was around that, and then it went all over the place. So when I work with engineers, often they get kind of stuck into, let's say, trying to deliver features or finishing stories. If you ask them what productivity means, they're like, okay, I finished story points, I finished stories, I finished features. And I try to expand their thinking beyond that kind of thinking. And I think that there's 5 elements of, let's say, value, if you try to simplify it, like how a company would define it. So you have the commercial value. So this is like, if we build this thing, then we're going to have money right away. So it's like the big pocket of money. So maybe you have a customer that has loads of money, and the only reason you're developing that feature is because they want it. It's their little pet project, but they're going to give you loads of money. So then it's worth to develop. Another is customer value. So for those customers you already have, if you develop this feature, then the customer's happier. They're more likely to stick. They're going to keep using your product. So that's customer value, and that can be split down into so many different aspects, especially if you're thinking of front end. Is it more usable? Is it, so that can be split into like multitudes of different types of value. Then you have market value. So if I build this feature, more customers are going to use my product. Sometimes you develop something which more customers are going to be attracted to your product if you build this. However, the customers you already have will be a little bit detracted from it, or not as happy. So you're trying to balance, market value, customer value, commercial value. Then you have what's called efficiency value. This is probably one of the favorite ones of engineers because if we, let's say, develop this feature or work on this aspect of the code or something like this, then our cost of operation decreases. So we will need less, let's say, operators when we operate it. So maybe it's by automation. Perhaps you are making things more streamlined, etc. And then the last one I would say is future value. And the tricky thing about future value is it's near future, not like 10 years down the road. But if we do this thing, then one of those other elements of value are going to have a big boost. So, if you're thinking like you're a product owner or something and you're trying to figure out like what we're going to do next, you're really balancing all of these aspects so that, okay, if I choose this efficiency value thing over here, but it decreases my customer happiness or makes the market leave, is it worth it? And you're balancing all of these aspects of value. So when I'm working with engineers and they want that thing, that story, like, oh, I want to use a different technology. So we're going to start writing in Kotlin instead of Java. I always say, okay, if you want to get that on your backlog, you're going to have to start speaking in value. Otherwise, it will never be prioritized. So what is the company saving when you do that? How is that going to improve the customer's experience? Will that bring more customers to us if we do that? Or perhaps by doing that, we open up all of these other features that we have access to, and then very short in the, let's say, short term in the future, more customers are going to want to use this because we have more things that we can play with. So it's quite simple in my definition is those 5 things. Of course, organizations have things like compliance, and, where there's a lot of value in making sure the whole company doesn't break down, et cetera. But again, that is very tightly coupled to those 5 bases. So by not having a big security issue, you're going to keep your customers. So it's all tied in. So I like to keep it simple, keep it to those 5, and get engineers to start talking like that when they're asking for something. And that is part of the way that you also engage them and get them excited because they are actually producing value and not story points and things like that. So everything they do is important for the organization.
Great.
No, excellent. Thank you.
Sorry, what did you say, Krishna? What are you talking?
That was excellent. I couldn't have said it better. That was excellent.
Thank you.
And Steve has been calling me the value guy lately. You did.
I thought you might like it. It's all about value streams right in the end.
You got it. I see to you. I see the name to you.
So what else? Steve, what's your thought on defining value and helping people align around what value is?
I'm a broken record. Because let's take the customer perspective and now what is value for the customer? Now you can break it down in many ways, but the way that Goldberg would say is it's the customer's constraint. So constraint management is not only a way to look at your own organization, but it's also a way to look at your customer. And if you are able to envision, to design an offering a product service that helps the customer, or even better, a category, a market segment to address their systemic constraint, well, then you are definitely providing value to them. Otherwise, you risk to give them products that might be short-lived because they don't have a long future. And therefore, when you are in a situation of product design, so you need to design a product or a service, and you can do all sorts of exercises with design thinking, and there are many techniques. But one thing that many just ignore is, now, the simple question, what is the constraint of the customer? Find that single thing, and even your product development becomes much, much smaller because you're addressing a microscopic element, the constraint, out of many things you could address. And probably because your competition is not doing this, your offering will be valued in the customer's eye much, much more. So you see, constraints management is not only about finding the bottleneck, and it's not only about resolving the conflicts to produce the unity of purpose. It's also a way to think about what is valuable for the customer.
Can I say something?
Please, yeah.
I totally agree with what Steve just said, right? I think it is hugely, like, especially in software, one of the things that we tend to think of is we have to keep producing stuff. We have to ship, right? In reality, the customer doesn't care about 90% of the stuff we ship. They don't often think about it day to day. That is not their constraint, right? Once you have a product in the market and people are using it, right? They're actually getting value out of it, whether or not you add that extra feature or not. As Sarah said, most of those are adds in efficiency, small changes incrementally, right? The customer himself, if you get to the point where software engineering is a constraint, your company is in trouble, right? It shouldn't be the constraint, right? For the most part. So you actually have a lot more leeway to actually prioritize, take a deep breath, and understand what is important, what's not important, when you're actually focused on what is important to the customer, as opposed to, well, we need to ship this many features this quarter. We need to sort of look at, our velocity is low. We have to maximize throughput. And none of those really are important until you trace it back to, all right, is that something that is standing in the way of the customer getting value today, right? And for most mature companies, I think you're often not in that space, right? You have a product out there. You have, incremental change. If you're a startup, absolutely, that's your reason to live, right? But once you pass, scale out, most of your constraints are elsewhere. They're not in the critical path of the customer, right? So that gives you a lot of options. But if you're still focused on shipping features, then you think, okay, everything I'm delivering is value. It is not. Most of it is not value, So that's why it's important.
And actually removing features can be valuable for the customer.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Think of iPhone. It's like, if you think about iPhone and what they're doing with iPhone and how they're extending.
We don't care. iPhone 18. I mean, iOS 18. Who cares?